Welcome to Dartisans 13, a birthday special. This is the M1 release of Dart. Happy birthday, Seth. How do you feel?
Yes, happy birthday, JJ.
This is a big day. I'm super excited about this.
And I have to say, our early adopters in our community really made this happen. We've been working really hard, the engineering team, but we've seen a ton of libraries, and part of the things we'll talk about is how the community has helped us get to this point.
Yeah, like one bug at a time, like thousands of them.
Yes, yeah. I think somebody did the math. It's something like 30 commits a day averaged out.
30 commits a day.
Our team has been cranking.
It moves really quickly. So I'm JJ Behrens. This is Seth Ladd, and later we're going to have Gilad Bracha, and we're going to just spend today celebrating the M1 release of Dart. Did you bring champagne?
I didn't. We're going to do something bigger for 1.0, but I think one of the main messages with M1 is this is our first release since our public launch about a year ago. And this one puts us on that train for 1.0.
Yep.
So you'll see more milestones from here, but now we're in the groove here, and we're really comfortable with where the project is now to get us to a later 1.0 state.
Well, I was actually hoping you'd bring the champagne because, I've been watching the Giants as they make their way to the World Series. Did you know those guys get to go to the whole champagne celebration like 4 times?
I just want to dump Gatorade on Gilad for 1.0.
That would be fun.
That'd be good.
I would watch that. So let's start with a little bit of background material first, and then we'll go into some M1 features, and then we will grill Gilad really badly on all the M1, intrinsics and stuff like that. So what is Dart? So it's about productivity. It's about more powerful tools, tools that understand more about your code and can do more with your code. And it's about more structured code so that we don't have, 10 billion different libraries that each have their idea of what a class is.
Yeah, and I like to look at Dart like a scalable language as well, where you can start with a small set of files, maybe just one file, top-level functions. You don't even need classes in the beginning. And this is a very web developer thing, right? You want to try out an idea, and then you want to iterate quickly and scale up or grow to many, many files, hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and that's where that structure really pays off. So you integrate the classes, the implicit interfaces, the optional static types, and now you've got maybe 100 developers and using all the HTML5 features out there. And so I love to see that from small to big story with Dart.
Yeah, I keep meaning to do a blog post where, I always say that languages don't scale, architecture scale, but that's scalability in terms of number of servers. But if you talk about number of programmers, I think Dart really is
or lines of code.
Yeah, lines of code, then Dart really is aimed to be a more scalable language.
Absolutely.
So the next thing is it's about performance. With Dart snapshots, Dart apps can start up 10 times faster.
Yeah, and in fact, I think we have a nice slide here. Let's tell them what snapshots are, actually.
Yeah,
this is a Dart VM only feature. But what it does is it takes it serializes the token stream that the parser will create when it loads in all the source code. So of course you can always start from the source code, which is typical of a web app. But of course the parser has to do a bunch of steps to verify that's correct. But then with the snapshot, you can snapshot that state before it starts executing the program. And then the next time you start up, it's about 10 times faster with our early stats from Dart to JS, which is our Dart to JavaScript compiler. But that's a significant increase. And when you think of things like mobile devices, where the web and just usage in general of computing is so much more important, those devices are typically underpowered compared to these guys. So anything you can do with startup speeds is really, really helpful to get that app to start right up.
Yeah, the way I like to explain this is if you go to Gmail, as much as those guys work on performance and as crazy as they are about performance, it still takes a couple seconds to load up. And imagine going to Gmail in a new tab and it loads up in 0.2 seconds.
Yeah, or 10 times faster. I mean, that works for me.
That would just be amazing. So. And also, this is kind of big news. The Dart VM is actually outperforming the V8 VM. And, we like to talk soft a little bit at Google, so we don't go shouting things from mountaintops. But V8 is the fastest.
I don't know if it's the fastest, but one of the fastest.
According to several benchmarks, I checked it by third parties. It is the fastest browser, according to Tom's Hardware and so forth.
Wow. Okay. But I know that a couple of benchmarks that we track internally with the Dart VM is now outperforming a couple of benchmarks in V8, which is great. And V8's had many, many years, and Dart's had about a year. And so it's really cool to see that competition. And I'm sure V8 is going to leapfrog, and we'll do this a lot. And that's great. Everybody wins in that scenario.
But, I think that there's something to be said for the fact that Dart is aimed at performance. The language itself is designed with performance in mind.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you want to give the disclaimer.
Well, I think we alluded to this, and we're not faster on every benchmark, but certainly part of the impetus for the whole project is boost in performance. So both the startup, which we showed, but then also raw computation performance. And the language was originally kicked off by the V8 engineers, so they know what it takes in language design to get a faster VM. And I think we're already starting to see some of this pay off, which is very cool.
So, and also Dart is about doing more. It's not just a language. There are a lot of languages, very nice looking languages that compile to JavaScript, but Dart's more than just a language. It's also a set of libraries. It's a new VM, so I think that's super exciting. We have the Dart editor that has amazing knowledge of your Dart code. There's Dartium, so that's the Dart VM integrated into Chromium. And then we have Dart2JS so that we can compile to JavaScript and support all those other browsers.
And I think that's one of the most important, if not most important, aspects of the project is that all this great work that we're doing can get compiled down to modern JavaScript, ECMAScript 5, and run across mobile, desktop, and mobile and desktop browsers. And that's fantastic. So you can write Dart code today, and it's not just a Chrome thing, right? It's a modern web thing.
Yep. So demo time. You want to take it over, Seth?
Sure. Let me do a couple demos here.
So.
In fact, I think this is a good time to introduce our special guest. We're going to talk about some of the new M1 features.
Gilad Bracha is here to talk to us. Wave hello, Gilad.
Hey, hello.
So he's going to set us straight in case we get anything wrong.
Oh, I could never set you straight.
Well, we should say that part of the M1 release is a lot of changes to the language. And a lot of this is driven by feedback, and we've been writing a lot of Darkcoat ourselves. And so I know, Gilad, you've run through a lot of different spec revisions since M1. I'd like to dive into one of the ones that comes from Smalltalk first, which I think is maybe slightly unfamiliar to some of our developers out there, but method cascades. Can you talk a little bit, where did that come from, and what do you hope people do with them?
Method cascades, historically, they come from Smalltalk. It's basically a situation where you want to send the same receiver, the same target object is going to get a series of messages, and rather than repeat that receiver over and over again, declaring a local variable probably to store whatever receiver it was, and then doing that, you have a syntactic sugar for that, and that works nicely in circumstances where works nicely in UI, in things that are sort of the jQuery style of things, so it seemed to apply to the web. It's a little bit different than the original, but people seem to like it. Like any other construct, it requires a bit of taste and judgment so that you don't abuse it and get into trouble. But if you format it nicely, it works well and gives people a nice way of saving a few keystrokes and explaining what they're doing. Making it more readable.
We have a demo of this. Maybe we can go to the laptop screen, and hopefully the font is big enough. But I pulled up two examples that do the same thing. The top is the method cascade syntax. This is as big as I can get it. Sorry. And you're right, so Gilad mentioned saving a couple of keystrokes. The bottom example you see, I repeat button.value, button.classes, button.text. Seems a little repetitive to me. And Gilad, you mentioned the jQuery. There's a slight difference there, though. That's the chaining type of API, right? And so Cascades is slightly different than chaining?
Well, it is, but you can use it for some of the same things, right? It can. The real fundamental thing is that it can help you design an API that'll work well with that. And so it actually can change how you structure your library once you know it's there.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I like about this feature is that we have this thing that we constantly do, but with just a little bit of syntactic sugar, it makes the code read a lot nicer.
And I figured out how to make this bigger, so hooray on me. Okay, good. Well, this is one of the features I'm really excited about. I've already used it when I program a lot of HTML APIs. And a lot of that's just set the ID, set the classes, set the button handlers, etc. And I don't know, I like it.
Yeah,
I'm happy I got in.
Don't repeat yourself.
That's right.
Okay,
what
so
other
next
demos
one,
do we have?
the this dot constructor arguments.
Okay, cool. Now this one's been in before M1. This is one of my favorite things. I know as a Java developer, I'm always repeating, and I think other languages too, always repeating in the constructor this.x equals x, this.y equals y. Very common pattern. So what did we do in Dart?
Well, just in case you haven't seen one of our other talks where we covered this, rather than receiving a parameter called name and saying this.name equals name, you could just receive this.name, and it does it automatically. And if you look at this code sample on this, we have a constructor called person, and the body is empty. It's just a semicolon. And we're receiving two parameters, this.name and this.position, and it automatically saves them into name and position.
In fact, I think what it does, it actually puts it in the initializer list. Is that correct? Because it doesn't actually do it in the constructor body.
No, yeah, I think it's in the
Yeah, but you really don't care.
Exactly.
Is the bottom line.
Yeah, it's set
it
before
basically
the
does
constructor
them.
body is
It's
run.
really at the beginning of the initializer list. It'll happen before anything else that you might have written.
Now, there's some other languages that have a feature similar to this, where they declare the name instance member inside the constructor, and you might wonder why we didn't do that, why we have these things separate, and that's because we support multiple constructors. So we could have one normal constructor and then the named constructor, and so it makes sense.
Here's an example of that. A lot of times you might build up objects from JSON or some binary serialization format, and thanks to named constructors, you can actually create person.from JSON, for instance, and I could say something like JSON string here.
Yep.
Which I love, because now it tells me right there when I'm using that constructor what its intention is.
So I guess we just did a twofer, because you just showed us named constructors.
Awesome.
Which is, I don't know of many other languages that did named constructors. Can you think of any?
No, the thing about Dart constructors that's really interesting, and named constructors is part of that, is that they retain the familiarity of constructors without the real problem that constructors have traditionally, which is that you're stuck creating an instance of this particular class, creating a new instance. You can't use constructors to get something out of a cache. You can't use them to, if you for some reason need to produce something else that obeys the same interface, right? It's all about objects that behave the same. And you can't do all that stuff with
these are the
regular
factory
constructors.
factory constructors.
Right. So Dart constructors are really interesting because they really give you the advantages that people try to get with all kinds of static factory patterns, but you don't have to go through the boilerplate, and you don't have to learn something radically different.
Yeah. I definitely think this is yet another case where, if you're coming from a Java or C# background, there are certain pain points in the language, and you know what they are, and so you know all the workarounds, where it's, if you just fix it in the language with a little bit of syntactic niceness, you could not have to suffer from those things anymore.
So let's talk about another feature that's been in before M1, and so this is the last one we'll show that's been there before, but I really, really like, and it's lexical scope or lexical closures. And so we have a demo up here, and this is something Dart does, I think, really, really well. Actually, we're seeing a couple of things here, right? We're seeing the one-line inline functions, and also lexical. Can you walk us through this code?
Yeah, sure. So we have function called main, and we have a local variable called numpresses, and we're going to query to find the increment button. If you know jQuery, this kind of looks familiar. And then we have on-click add, and then the thing inside parentheses is a callback, and it receives an event object, and the function just does numpresses ++. Now that's a nested function, but it has access to numpresses that's in the outer scope.
Yeah.
Now in the next line, we have query for show numpresses, and so this is a different button, and we do on-click add for that button, and here we use the different syntax for a function. This time we're using curly braces instead of the arrow syntax, and we do window.alert number of presses with numpresses. So this is an example of the string interpolation, but once again we're getting access to numpresses, which is from the outer function. And so in a certain sense, closures and classes have, there's a little bit of overlap. We have some shared state, and we have two different methods basically that operate on that shared state, and yet it's so small and elegant. And
I would say maybe not shared state. That makes me think of threads, but I think
it's not
the
threads.
Scoping, right?
The
Everyone can
scoping.
see it lexically. That is, the structure of the program defines which functions get to which variables, which I love. You can just take a look at it and tell what's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's very, very light overhead. And if you try to do this like in say JavaScript, where you have this nested function and you're using this will get lost. It won't refer to the actual object, it'll refer to the window object, and if you've ever had that bug, it's extremely painful.
So let's show a couple editor features now that we've shown some code. Okay, cool. Which one do we want to show? So we talked about performance, but we also talked about productivity, and the editor really helps us with that productivity. And so I'm going to show a couple of things here. Here's just some code I'm opening up, but as your code base grows, as it scales up to a large number of developers, you're going to need to start updating the code, cleaning it up based on what you've learned. And the last thing you want to do is globally search and replace and then hope all your names are unique, etc. You want your tools to handle these kind of cleanups and maintenance tasks for you. This is where refactoring comes in.
Yeah, this rename that you're about to show is really important because, as an old school JavaScript programmer, I come from the days before minimizers, and so I named all my variables A, B, AC, and it's a bad habit.
Not everyone has your super skills.
Well, photographic
so
memory.
Let's run this rename. In fact, I'm going to do one thing here. So I'm going to rename this connections variable here. But let's go down in here, and let's just to prove the point here, I'm going to create another connections object down in a totally different scope, down in main. And I want to show how this is not just a glorified search and replace, right? This actually understands the structure of the code. So if I rename connection, let's say it's too long, and let's say I want to actually, or I want to be more specific, so WebSocket connection. So notice how it's actually changing the rest of the variable names on the fly. But if I scroll down, right, the other connections for a totally different object is left unchanged. And that's the power of the editor being able to statically analyze the program, understand the structure, and give you these refactoring tools, which I love.
I'm trying to do it as a Vim plugin, but it's actually pretty hard.
It is hard. So let's say also, as you scale up programs, right, you're going to grow the number of developers on your team, and you're going to grow the size of the program. You can't fit it all in your head. And of course, a new guy comes on, he can't just absorb the code. He's going to be working with new APIs he's unfamiliar with. So can the tools help you with that? Of course, we have a feature called code completion. Let me see if I can zoom in here.
Control space, and you automatically popped up with all of the available methods. And if you don't happen to have the full API for everything in Dart memorized, that's actually really, really helpful.
Yeah, it's fantastic, especially integrating with a new team or using a third-party library. These tools should be able to walk you through that process. I love that.
That's definitely for coding in the large because the bigger the code base gets, the harder it is to have all of those things in your mental cache space.
Yeah, so I love the fact that I'm more productive with these kind of tools.
Absolutely.
Okay, so last demo with the editor for productivity is using the editor to launch into Dartium, which is Chromium with the VM, and then also compiling to JavaScript.
Yep.
And debugging this code. So debugging, obviously very important. You don't want to run print statements everywhere. So let's show an example of that. I believe if I launch this project here, run in Dartium.
So here you are running with Darkcoat natively using the Dart VM running in a version of Chromium.
Bingo.
And so it runs.
It's running fine. So let's go back over to the, hello. Let's load up one of these. And let's set a breakpoint. Okay, so what happened right here? So I'm going to zoom in over here. The debugger in the editor launched immediately as the instant I set the breakpoint.
That's just amazing. You set the breakpoint and you didn't even restart the app.
Right, so let's go over to the app. Oh, and it's
frozen.
So the editor's talking to Dartium, and I love this. So then you can step through the code. You can run it again.
There's a stack.
Yep, you
with
can
local
open up
variables.
the objects. So this is that integrated debugging. So you might be like, okay, that's great, obviously, for 95% of your development, but then you have to go test in other browsers, right? That last kind of 5%. So let's show you how you might do that. Well, I'm going to run as JavaScript here. And the editor is going to run Dart.js, which is itself written in Dart, which is very cool.
Yeah. I got no respect for non-self-hosted languages.
So what is it doing here? So it launches it into Chromium. So this is regular Chromium. It doesn't know a thing about Dart. And then you're saying, well, of course, how do I debug this? Isn't compiled code really complicated and everything? So let's load up the dev tools here. And, this is interesting. So I'm going to zoom in.
There you go.
And we have here, sorry, everyone, the dev tools, the source tab, actually showing me Darkcoat. Now, how is this possible? Because Chrome doesn't know anything about Dart. It just has V8. Well, we have this really cool feature called source maps, which when you compile the JavaScript, it also generates this mapping file between the Dart source code and the compiled output JavaScript. And then it shuttles all that to Chrome's dev tools, which then goes through this mapping file. And when you open up and do debug, here's an actual breakpoint of Dart code.
That is just
mapped into the JavaScript code, all behind the scenes for you. And of course, the app is stopped. So now you can debug compiled JavaScript via Dart in Chrome's developer tools.
I'm going to have to say this is my favorite feature from DevTools for like the entire year.
This is fantastic. Yeah, this is now source maps is not just a Dart thing, right?
Yeah.
I believe other languages compile source maps. So.
You want to step over some code?
Sure. Let's just show you that same kind of deal, right? You can set the breakpoints. You can step over and
one to the right.
This guy.
There you
Let's
go.
see if that works. Yep. Okay,
Yeah,
so
we're
step-
stepping.
Yeah.
That's just amazing.
Very, very cool stuff.
Right, and
Okay.
that's just in normal Chrome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So that's the demo portion.
Yep.
Let's talk about M1.
M1.
Okay.
I still think we
What
should.
is M1?
You know, I still think we should have worn suits to celebrate this.
1.0.
Like, you know.
1.0.
Oh yeah.
What is M1?
So M1 is our first release milestone. It's a signal to developers that things are stabilizing, that now's a good time to start building your app in Dart, that we're going to try really hard to not make backwards incompatible changes, but rather we're going to be polishing the language, adding to it, and then working a lot on performance.
Yeah.
But this is still a 0.1 release. I still think we should call it 0.9, but Gilad didn't
Version
listen
numbers
to me.
don't mean much, but I think that the message there is that it's early and it's not a 1.0.
No.
But we're starting this release train.
Yeah.
And a lot has stabilized.
So tell me, what's new?
Well, a lot of language features, and so I want to dive in. Let's see, we can actually load up. We have a nice article on dartlang.org about... Let's just load up this guy. There we go. Oh, okay, here we go. All right, let's fix the link.
Sorry.
And again, there's a nice article on the dartlang.org site about the different language changes for M1. There's quite a big list. And this is a perfect time to chat with Gilad, I know, because you helped shuttle a lot of these changes through based on feedback or not. And so I kind of want to start with, which one of these are you most excited about, some of the changes since our first launch?
The one that I'm most excited about is actually the removal of something, right?
oh, yes.
Yes, tell me about
adding
that.
features is easy
Yeah.
and doesn't always help. What helps is getting rid of stuff,
Yes,
which
yes.
usually you can't do. And the
Well
fact that
done.
we got rid of interface declarations
Yes.
Yeah.
has kind of,
Yeah.
which in itself relied on the fact that classes act as interfaces vis-a-vis the type system, and you can implement a class.
Yeah.
And you could do that before. And each of those things were just based on the fundamental understanding of what an object-oriented language should be.
So
And that's really the good
So
stuff. It simplifies
Deleting
so much.
stuff,
Yeah.
code
yeah.
or in spec is always good.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So if someone's out there and he's saying, well, interfaces are good. What are you talking about? You got rid of interfaces. What did they use instead of interfaces?
Interfaces are good, and interfaces logically are still there because the entire system is based on the notion of interface. What matters is what an object interface is, but we don't have interface declarations. Because once you have interface declarations, you had to decide, well, am I going to declare an interface or use an abstract class or use the class I already have? And then if I put an interface, what are the trade-offs? Well, gee, I can't put static methods in there. What about the default values for the parameters? There are all kinds of questions that came up. And the best solution is to nip this in the bud and get rid of all these questions.
So now they would just use an abstract class, and
Yeah.
you could say that you implement the abstract class or you extend the abstract class, and it's kind of up to you.
It depends. If it's a purely abstract class, then you probably want to implement it. If it's actually, if it has functionality that you want to reuse, you might extend it. The advantage, of course, of implementing is that there might be several, right? If it's really acting as an interface, then you don't want to get into this business of conflicting implementations from multiple inheritance, but multiple classification in the sense of supporting multiple interfaces doesn't raise any of those questions, and that's what you'd end up doing.
Yep.
The nice thing about these abstract classes is that they can still use the factory constructors we talked about earlier, so that you can actually just refer to this type throughout your system and create new instances, and it might, if it's set up correctly, it may be able to actually produce instances of a particular concrete class.
Yep. Very good.
Are there any cases where we've already taken advantage of this new functionality in the libraries? Have you noticed anything?
We're still in transition there, right? So the goal of M1 was to get past the stage of breaking language changes.
Yeah.
Breaking library changes, I think, are still plenty to come, to be honest.
And in fact, the editor has this really great cleanup feature, because you're right, I suspect a lot of library stuff's going to happen, and so a lot of people might say, if I write Darkcoat today, what's going to happen? Well, this is the advantage of a language that's more structured and analyzable. There's a cleanup feature. It's really cool. It will change from the old syntax to the new syntax
Yeah,
for you.
I love
and
that.
so that's why I feel more comfortable now with the upcoming changes.
Right. So we still are supporting some of the old syntax, and that'll go away probably by M2. And the editor will automatically convert for you.
Wait a second. Did you leak the fact that there's going to be an M2 after an M1?
I did not leak anything. I announced.
When I state it, it is fact. There will be an M2.
There will be. I wonder if Lars knows.
That's right. Well, another big feature, and it's actually a collection of features in M1, was the changes or enhancements to libraries. We added re-export and a new syntax. Can you talk about some of the things that help us?
So again, this was the library design went through a lot of ups and downs over the past year and a half since we started, and certainly it became clear that the original functionality wasn't quite enough. So partly there were syntactic complaints, which were understandable. There was some motivation behind the old syntax, but it didn't really wash. And so the new syntax is cleaner, less noise. And but the important thing is functionality, that you have better control over the namespaces of libraries. So the export directive basically lets you say that, very often you find you have these libraries that are just, they're aggregating a bunch of other libraries, and they want to provide that same API to their users without them necessarily being aware of all the subcomponents. So you can re-export the API of another library. The other thing you can do is you can control how much, because we have these show and hide combinators that let you say that, I only want to export these identifiers from this library. So I can say show ABC and I'll only get ABC. Or I can say I want to hide this one because it might conflict with something else. And so I can narrow down these namespaces and control them, and that gives you a pretty powerful way of snapping things together.
And this is all about that kind of scalability, right? I mean, you can start without libraries, even without classes if you want, and as you grow, you can introduce libraries and then maybe composed libraries, and I love it. It just helps you grow.
Right, and we tweaked a few of the rules about libraries, because on the one hand, we do want to let people know about conflicts. On the other hand, we really want code to be robust, because third parties are adding stuff to their libraries, and what if it suddenly conflicts with yours? So some of the rules have changed a bit to make that hold up better. So your library takes priority over stuff that you're importing, things like that.
Cool.
And so I think we're in much better shape there than we were.
Good.
Great. So there's a ton of features here.
There's almost too many features. I don't know. Anything else you like here?
Well, I think that a lot of people, perhaps if they're at a moderate level of knowing Dart, they might not know all of these new M1 features.
Yeah.
So can we look at this slide real quick? And we'll zoom in, and why don't we just run down these super quickly? I know that there's a lot.
Pick out a couple, but you're right. If you first or only saw Dart about a year ago, a lot has changed.
I definitely recommend that. This is one of those articles that's a must read.
Yeah. Let me show the title here. So Milestone 1, Language Changes. It's on dartlang.org. And it's really nice. Bob Nystrom has done a great job here with examples as well. So it's not just an enumeration, but it's also, there's some justification in here and examples of before and after.
One of the ones I love is the fact that we now have some notion of first-class types. And the reason I love this is because I like to remember what Dart stands for, according to the language spec. It's dynamic and reified types, if I remember right.
Is that
I'm not sure where you got that, but it makes sense to me.
I had to ask another language guy. Was like, what does reified mean? And he's like, duh, you should know that.
I think we need to update this article.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all about dynamic and reified types.
Yeah, that's news to me, but I like it. It's interesting how people come up with these post facto interpretations.
Yes. And that one was post facto. Yes, absolutely.
So M1 is more than just a slew of language refinements and changes, right? There's also platform additions as well.
Yeah. So a lot of new editor features. Man, the editor moves at a furious pace. Those guys, as soon as I create a bug, it seems like next week it's fixed. I don't know how they do it.
Well, some of the new features you saw refactoring, but they have quick fixes, which is somewhere between just code cleanup and refactoring. There's actually the explicit cleanup that helps you update your code. The debugging, you saw lots of good stuff in the editor.
Now, I remember when Dart first came out, people really took us to task for generating large JavaScript output. And this was something about the fact that we were trying to do, small talk like hot code reloading. But these days, we have much smaller JavaScript output because we do all kinds of things like tree shaking and so forth. So that, in the JavaScript world, you might want to use a bunch of libraries, but you get really, really paranoid about, how big is this library? How much is this going to cost my page? But with Dart and with Dart to JS, we could just tree shake, and you only you only have to pay for what you actually use.
Yeah, and so here's a Dart.js output. You're right, it was quite large in the beginning. We are on the third generation Dart.js compiler. I just compiled a hello world, which just says hello world, in Dart into JavaScript, and right now it's 2,400 bytes.
Yep.
So we've made tremendous improvements there, and I think the team continues to reduce the size. But yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy where we are.
I would say that another thing to point out is that Dart doesn't really entirely disappear at runtime. You know, there's some languages where they have this approach where you compile it to JavaScript, and there is no notion of a runtime. Whereas that was not one of our goals. We really wanted a runtime. So you could ask a generic, you know, are you a list of buttons?
I would think of it like we need to retain the semantics of the language. So it's not like we bring over the Dart runtime with JavaScript, but you're right. There are differences in terms of what are the semantics when you call a method and it doesn't exist, or integers, or generics. We bring those over as well through Dart.js.
And if you turn on checked mode, you'll get type assertions at runtime, which is great during development. You could catch if you're creating type mistakes at runtime. Yeah.
Well, one of the big asks we had that we're delivering here with M1 is our JavaScript interoperability, which is huge. So this allows you to run or integrate with JavaScript code like Google Maps, your own in-house JavaScript code, and use it straight with Dart. And this is all open source. It's on GitHub as well. We'll let you guys check it out. But yeah, we've got demos of Google Maps, Twitter API, a couple others, actually written with Dart using those stateful object-oriented JavaScript APIs.
So the one thing I want to point out about the JS Dart interrupt, if you've looked at this closely, it's not trivial. You know, certain languages, they compile to JavaScript, and there's no disconnect at all between those two languages. And so you might wonder, well, why does it seem a little bit harder in Dart? And that's because we want to support, you know, the Dart VM. We want to have things like faster VM performance. We want to run way faster. We want those things like snapshots. And getting you know, two different VMs to work together is not so easy. You know, there's some cross VM garbage collection issues, and so yes, it is a little bit harder than some certain other languages. Not impossible.
Well, here, so let's go to the computer screen. You can see an example of Google Maps, and I actually think it's pretty straightforward. You're right.
It is straightforward.
It's not like a CoffeeScript integration, but with a couple, I would almost say wrapping functions. Right? There's a way to declare what the scope is of some of these JavaScript variables. There's a way to create a Dart proxy of a JavaScript object, but that's just kind of the boilerplate setup. When you're actually dealing with the actual business logic, which is the majority of the code, this is the part that I've highlighted right here. It's Darkcoat.
It's invisible behind the scenes proxies with, you know, so it's not difficult. But I just want to point out that you know, we want to have with this with the Dart VM, we're going to get all these additional benefits, and that's
right. We need to work in a multiple VM world,
and we really, you know, Dart wants to push the web forward, and so this is us pushing the web forward.
Yeah. One of the other huge additions to the platform is our package manager.
Yeah.
And you know, all big successful programming ecosystems, if you will, have a great package manager.
So that went live, what, like an hour ago?
Yeah, this is part of the release. We call it pub because you play darts in a pub. So let's do a demo of that. And so we have the ability to publish packages on a centralized hosting, pub.dartlang.org. Soon you as external developers will be able to upload and publish your own packages. And today you can use those packages hosted at pub. So I think I have an example of that here. This is one of my favorite demos. Okay, and I'm going to...
Oh, that's all.
Okay, so let's start here. So on the computer screen here, you've got just a simple app, but it's referring to 3 different packages. And I'm going to get these from pub. And of course, my editor here doesn't know anything about them because I haven't installed them yet. But thanks to our integration with pub into the editor, I can just go up to Tools and run pub install. Whoop. It helps if I choose the directory. Okay, let's do that. So now it's running out to pub and various sources you declared where to get the packages from. And it pulls them down and creates all the necessary symlinks so that my local application understands where these different packages are, and it's all relative to the project. So let's hope this finishes here. Let's just kill the editor.
The demo gods.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway. Uh-oh.
So we launched Pub today. Was it pub.dartlang.org? And so we already have a long list of packages. But over the coming quarter, we're hoping to, really increase that. And so, if you have a library that you could port to Dart, put it on Pub, and then everyone will benefit. And a lot of people. I talk to a lot of kids and they're like, oh, I want to get into Google. And, I always ask, well, do you have any open source contributions? Now's a really good time, port a library, get it up on GitHub, get it up on Pub, and, become famous. And then step for profit, I think.
Well, if I can get the demo back up, we'll go back to it. But we've got a lot of good questions from the community. And so let's go back to Gilad. And I want to start with, let's set the record straight, I think. Is Dart out to replace JavaScript?
Why do you hate JavaScript so much?
You're not interested in why I hate or love anything. Dart is not out to replace JavaScript. This is something that I guess various commentators jump to that conclusion, and once that happens, no amount of denials will help. I mean, not that I personally. I mean, there's a long list of programming languages I personally would eradicate, but that's not what Google is trying to do here. Right. We compiled a JavaScript. I mean, one thing about people at Google, whatever people may say of us, I don't think they often say that we're stupid. And so the idea of getting rid of JavaScript is quite unrealistic, and we have no interest in doing that. We're compiling to JavaScript because we see JavaScript as a substrate that can enable languages, and multiple languages, Dart of course, but potentially lots of other languages, just like x86 or any other part of the ecosystem. The question is, do you want to work with it directly? And I don't think so.
Yeah.
So it just builds on the existing lingua franca infrastructure of the web. Yeah.
And we have a lot of people at Google who really, really love JavaScript. Those Angular guys, man, they love it.
Good framework.
Yeah, it is good framework. Yeah.
So this I'm really curious about. So you've seen a bunch of Dart code getting written over the past year and iterations of spec. What is some of the best feedback you've received? Or
the best feedback is feedback that tells you about a problem, right? So I'm trying to do this with a library because I have, Dart HTML and it's too big and I want to show people only a part of it, or generally feedback that tells you about the problem someone's trying to solve, as opposed to feedback that tells you, I want this thing from my favorite language, that is prescriptive solutions. Because the prescriptive solutions aren't very useful to me. They're not likely to actually work in a different setting. If they do, they'll bring the exact same problems that they had in that setting. And so you really want to listen to people tell you about their problems, not the solutions.
This is definitely a good case why languages designed by committee, with the exception of Haskell, don't always work out so smoothly.
Please go on.
Well, so what I'm hearing is we love the feedback that's more about use cases. So tell us what you're trying to do and what was difficult, and we'll help come up with that solution.
Right.
Great. Well, M1 is a stabilization, but it doesn't. We're not done. So I know we've got a couple things kind of coming down the pipe. Can you give us a little hint about what you're thinking about?
So mixins is something we already. I think Lars spoke about it already at Google I/O and mentioned that we do that. So that'll be coming at some point down the pipeline. I'm very excited about that. Again, that's something that helps you structure things better. There are very concrete scenarios. That's one of the reasons libraries will be heavily impacted by that, because you'll be able to organize things in a way that'll let you share code more effectively and so forth. Then of course mirrors are my it's both a language. It's not really a language construct, but it's more a magical library that lets you do things with the language. And so right now we have introspection in the VM, but we don't have support for all this stuff in Dart2JS. So we're warning people about that. We don't want anyone playing with it in the VM and then suddenly realizing that it's not going to work for them in Dart2JS. And there's a lot more to mirrors beyond the current introspection support that we like to do. Adding and changing code dynamically, debugging support, making things like REPLs trivial, making fix and continue debugging trivial, that sort of thing.
I'm really looking forward to that.
And of course, this is complicated in the Dart context because of these issues of the fact that you don't really download all your code, or your code gets mangled, minified, whatever.
Yeah.
And having mechanisms to control that, so we don't want a situation where just because you use mirrors, suddenly all bets are off and suddenly your download explodes, because we want to give you a relatively fine-grained mechanism using metadata, which is another new feature that that has just come in, to specify, well, I'm going to need this stuff reflectively even though it isn't actually being used right now, so please preserve that information for me, things like that.
Yeah,
I love to see the language continue to evolve. This is great.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to try this demo one more time. Here we go. Everyone cross their fingers. So we're back at the computer screen here, and I've restarted the editor. The errors still exist here in this simple app about missing packages, but let's go ahead and see if we can run pub again. Okay. It wasn't meant to be. That's all right.
It was not meant to be.
That's okay. It worked for me yesterday. That's a typical response for programmers, right?
Usually.
Or it worked on my machine.
Yeah.
That's another good
So sorry about that. That's funny. It always works. Like, pub is not one of those things that causes me a lot of problems. But
oh, weird. Okay. So it looked like it worked. It just, never mind. All right. We'll come back.
Okay. Sorry about that.
But we're only M1, right? So
Yeah.
it's okay. We're allowed one bug. Okay.
One bug. Until M2, right?
Then you'll have 2 bugs. Yeah, actually, probably a lot more. That's another thing. When we say that the language is stable, you have to take that with a grain of salt, in the sense that we have no intention of making any more breaking changes unless we've really screwed up. And the other thing is, from the end developer's perspective, the fact that the spec says, well, this is the way it is and we don't intend to change that, obviously there are going to be bugs, so people will still have to adjust to things working differently than the way they work right now. And library changes, are just as important, if not more so. And there will be additions, but those additions, we don't see them, impacting what's already there in a big way, breaking them. So the main message is we're past the radical language reshuffling phase.
Yeah.
I think that if people want to stay current on these things, they should just follow the blog. I mean, every time, we're discussing upcoming things, I mean, it's on the blog.
Right.
Yeah.
Another big change coming down is web components.
Components.
This is web components are a future spec really made available today thanks to our compilation step. So it's an encapsulation model around the structure and the behavior and the style of elements that you would typically just kind of lay out on your page. Thanks to web components, you can encapsulate them up into new elements and compose your page out of more true elements. And the Dart team's been hard at work, again, open source on GitHub, to make the web component model a reality today. And we've already got some demo apps like To Do, MVC. So I expect to see more, along with the library updates and language evolution stuff, but also a lot more with web components. So stay tuned for that.
Web components are big.
So you alluded to the news and update service we have. So there's a lot of stuff we just presented here, and the train's going to keep on rolling. What are some good ways that people can get involved and or follow along with Dart?
Well, you could start by going to dartlang.org. You could download the editor. There's a mailing list that moves crazy fast. I can't read as fast as it moves. But if you have questions about specific things you're stuck on in your Dart code, I think you should post questions to Stack Overflow. And remember, if you ask a question and then Seth or me answers it, you got to +1 it, because we get like my salary is directly connected to the little green check marks.
We're now an officially sponsored tag on Stack Overflow for Dart, which I'm really happy with, and so a lot of good community involvement there.
Yep.
Great, and then dartbug.com.
Dartbug.com. So my favorite thing is I come up with some random crazy feature because I wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night. The first thing I do is I whip out my Android phone and then I go to dartbug.com/new and I create a new feature. And then the next day, Gilad says, JJ, stop doing that. Maybe.
But it is great. Your bugs and feedback, we love. It's really helped evolve the language and libraries, the platform, to where it is today, and I'm hoping to see the community continue to grow. So thanks for supporting Dart up to M1, and we look forward to hosting more packages on Pub and seeing more cool Dart libraries and apps out there soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Gilad, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gilad.
Thank you all for watching this episode of Dartisans.
Yes, thank you. See you next time.